everyone, it's Leanne. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. For today's video, I'm going to show how I made this sweet little card, and this is a thank you card using the Thanks a Bushel stamp set from Lawn Fawn. So to begin, I have a piece of Neenah Solar White cardstock for stamping and a piece of mixed media paper from Strathmore, and then I have two folded cards already cut to A2 card size. I'm going to put those together and just line up that edge to create a square card. And then I have a circle template from my generic package of circle templates I picked up at Michael's. And this is the stamp set here that I'm going to be using. So I've made sure that the circle I chose fits just comfortably around the main stamp that I'm going to use, that little bushel of apples. And then I'm going to use some distress inks. I love distress inks. So I have candied apple, seedless preserves, and carved pumpkin. So I'll be using those for the background, and then I have some blending tools as well. I'm going to do some embossing. I have Recollections white embossing powder from Michael's. This is in the color Snow, just a basic white. So I'm going to cut my card first. So this is kind of a cheat way to make a square card because I already have folded cards. And I do want to keep that A2 format, that it fits in the same envelope. So I'm just using my paper cutter and trim that down, and I've got a quick square card. So that was super easy. Now I'm going to prepare the border. So I'm going to use some Post-it tape to put my circle down, and I'm just measuring out the center. I want to keep that as much to the center as possible for this here. So the Post-it tape has low stickiness. It won't leave a mess on your artwork, and so I like to use this for tacking things down that I will remove later. So I'm going to use Versamark ink. This is a clear embossing ink. And so it's a sticky ink, but it doesn't leave a color. So I can use any color of embossing that I want to use, and it doesn't disrupt the color of the powder. So because my powder is white, this is especially good. So I'm going to stamp this main apple here just around the edges of my border. And this gets tricky when you're stamping because it's hard to see where you put the stamps. So I try to work quickly so I can keep it fresh in my mind where I'm stamping. Or you can hold it up to the light and see the reflection of the clear stamp. Or you could just sprinkle some of the embossing powder on it and then keep working. So I didn't actually go this fast. I've sped up the video, but I did try to work really quickly just to remember approximately where I was putting my apples down on that border. So now that I've got it all stamped, I have a piece of paper underneath that's folded just to catch the embossing powder that I use. I've taken off that template end, so I'm just going to sprinkle embossing powder all over this and get that set pretty quickly. The ink from the stamp pad doesn't dry too fast, but I always worry about missing it, or if an edge dried too quickly or something and I wasn't able to catch it with the powder. So there you can see that I've put the powder on, and I'm going to put this under my heat embossing tool. And so there you can see what it looks like after. And so now I'm going to do my Distress ink blending on top of that. So I'm going to start with my carved pumpkin. I'm going to work on an angle top right, or top left to bottom right corner. And so I have this turned around, so I have that in that angle. And so these distress inks are beautiful. If you've seen my favorite card making items video, this is, I think, one of my top, I think it's number one, I can't remember. But it is definitely in my top 5. I love distress inks. Their colors are so vibrant and they blend really beautiful. And these are my favorite colors for fall. Using these 3 colors together just makes such a pretty gradient, a pretty background. I just love it. So I was really excited to make this card with these colors. Fall is actually my favorite season. So I've been thinking about this card for a while. So I'm using Strathmore mixed media paper for blending, and I find that this works the best with distress inks, and it's nice and versatile too because it will work with other mediums. If you use watercolor on mixed media paper, then it comes out very vibrant and bright, which I love. And then you can also use watercolor, you can use COPIC markers. So it's really nice and versatile. So you can, if you're going to use a mixed medium base, like if you're going to blend some things together, a few different things, this is definitely the paper you want to use, especially for distress inks. So there's a look at that gradient. I'm really happy with how this is looking. So I'm going to bring that circle template back in and cut out my frame. And so there I've run it through my Sizzix Big Kick. And so I'm going to get my stamping paper prepared next. So I just need this piece of Neenah Solar White cardstock to be a little bit smaller than that border that it will sit under. So I'm just going to mark this with my pencil and then quickly chop it with my paper cutter. And I love this paper cutter because it's really tiny and I can just throw it on my desk, quickly chop something down and then toss it to my art cart at the side of my desk, and it's super handy. So now I'm going to mark out that circle because I want to make sure that I do my stamping within and it's lined up straight. So I'm going to use Memento Tuxedo Black ink for this because I'm going to use my Copic markers to color my stamp. So getting this prepared, I'm going to put this on my acrylic block, so it's time to stamp out that bushel of apples. So I find it's best, you get the best application if you take the ink pad and stamp it to the stamp instead of the reverse. I used to do it the other way and I found that it was harder to get an even distribution of ink. So I do find it's better to do it that way. And then I have a spare piece of paper here, so I'm going to stamp my sentiment on this and create a little border, just kind of like a little overlay for my sentiment that will sit on my card. So I'm stamping out the Thanks a Bushel here, and I'm just going to trim that down. I lined it up with the top edge for the distance that I wanted it. I don't want this to be too big. It's a tinier card because it is square. We've cut it down. So I just want to have a small border. So I've got that all trimmed up and I'm happy with how that's looking. Now before I begin doing my Copic colors, I get to add the faces to my apples. And I love this stamp set because there's a whole bunch of different faces you can pick from. So I always have a lot of fun choosing which ones I want to use and where I'm going to put them. So for the coloring, I'm going to use a blend with YG21, YG13, and YG25. So I'm doing some green apples. I don't have any green in my card, and these are my focal points, so I want them to stand out. And so by using green here, where it isn't anywhere else, it makes these apples the focal point because they are the spot color. So I'm going to use the yellow, the lightest color on their faces, and then I'm going to work out the shadows up from the edges to the middle, so giving that rounded look to the apples. So I'm just going to go one by one and color them in, and then I want to put shadows anywhere where the apples overlap and then around the edges of the apples, bringing it towards the center so it creates that round kind of look, gives them a little more three-dimension. Now once I get them colored up, I do find that the two greens are pretty similar, and I do want those shadows to be a little bit more beefy because I want to give more of that three-dimensional element. So I'm going to come in with another Copic marker at the end here and just enhance those shadows after I have everything colored. You'll see that in a bit in the video here. And there's also a little spot behind the stem of the apple, and I'm going to lay down some of that dark color in there too. That little pocket gives them a little bit of an indentation where their stem comes out. And just the darker shadows help add more emphasis. I find the darker the shadows are, the more round they look, as long as they're in the right locations. So here I'm using that YG09, and this is kind of a bright color, but it adds a darker shadow when it's overlaid on those greens that are already on the apple. Now to add things to make them a little bit more fun, I decided to pull in some purple in their leaves. I could do traditional, but I didn't want to do green. I've already got green of the apple. I could do a different green, but I wanted to just kind of make it a little fun. So I decided to pull some purple that matched the purple that was in the background, or I guess the frame, from the Distress inks. And then keeping that same idea, I'm going to pull some orange for the basket. Normally I would do a brown, but I thought it would be fun to keep going with the colors from the frame. And so I decided to pull in some of that orange and some golds and just creating those shadows along each of the plank lines so they look more round. And then the shadows underneath the straps that are holding the barrel together, I did those in like little loops, so that gave more of the illusion of the curvature of the planks. So here I'm just adding some texture lines because they are still wood, they're just a fun color of wood. So I've added some texture lines there, and then doing the straps for the barrel, I am going to pull in the red, which is the last color from the frame. So this will match the candied apple, the Distress ink. And then to soften that red a little bit, I'm pulling in this dark purple just in the shadows, and that just gives it a little more of a rose purpley color. I just found the red combinations that I had were a little bit too red, so I thought that that balanced out, and then I did the opposite with the leaves here, adding a little touch of red in the shadows on those purple leaves. So here's a sneak peek. I'm just lining it up and deciding how I want this to sit underneath that frame window. I've decided to center it, and then I'm going to put the banner across the bottom. Originally, I was going to have the bushel tucking underneath the bottom of the window, but I do want to have room for the banner. So I'm just marking out where I want that to be taped. And then coming in with my tape roller, I'm just putting some tape on the back of my stamped paper, and then I'm just going to add this to my folded card. So just lining that up. Super easy, and pushing it into place. Now I'm double checking my frame. Everything's still lining up, so it's really good. I'm going to put some foam tape on that frame. Normally I would put the foam tape on the focal element, but I thought I would do the reverse and have a little fun with this. And so the frame's going to be popped up, and the focal element will be on the base of the card. So I put some foam tape down, but I felt that the corners were still a little weak when I pushed on it. I didn't want those to sink in when the card's done, so I put a little more tape on those corners too. And so I line this up on the folded edge, putting the folded edge on my desk and just lining it up with the edge of my hands. I find that works super quick and easy instead of trying to do it specifically by hand. It's always easy to trim off one of the cut edges, but you can't trim a folded edge, so that's why I use that as my base. And so now I'm ready to put my sentiment on. I'm just going to trim this up. I don't want it to be as long as that paper is. I did leave it extra long just in case. It's always easier to go down shorter than it is to grow that paper. So I'm going to put some foam tape on this too, but I don't want to put foam tape inside the frame hole because that is a different height than the frame itself. So I'm just putting tape, foam tape on each end of my little banner, and I found I had a little extra room, so I'm going to throw an extra half piece on each side. Now to position this on my card, I'm going to use my X-Acto knife. I like to keep my hands out of the way so I can make sure that it's centered. And I always find it's easier if I can see the negative space on each side to find the center that way. And so once I have this lined up, I'm just going to quickly push it into place. Super easy. And then to bring my knife out, it did stick to the tape a little bit, so I just twist my knife and it comes out really easily. And so my card is ready. I had so much fun creating this, and it took no time at all. It was a super easy card, and I thought it looked really pretty. I liked the effect, and I love the little faces on the apples. They are my favorite. So there's a final look at the card, and I love the intense blending and colors of the distress inks. They're so beautiful. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you're notified as I post more videos. Thank you so much for watching.